All right. Well, welcome everyone. So excited that so excited that you decided to join me today. As you saw in the session descriptions, this section is called "I See More People," which may be kind of a strange title. But if you're not familiar with the term "I see," it means individual contributor. So I'm referring basically to designers who don't manage. And the more people aspect that I added on there was to really highlight an opportunity for managers to really broaden their understanding of what the role of being a design manager looks like. To give you a brief background on myself before I start the talk, I became a designer about 8 years ago. Been at IBM for 5 years, started as a UX designer and content designer, later became a design lead and user researcher. And about 9 months ago, I stepped into this role of design manager, primarily because I hadn't had a manager who was a designer. And so there were a lot of challenges that I faced that I really either had to solve as much as I could while doing my UX work or my visual work or content design work, or I had to just hope for the best and try to course correct things as they went along. And eventually, I got an opportunity to step into this role, and I've really found it at a place where I could both be the kind of support that I wanted when I was a designer, but also finding ways within this role to still bring the problem solving. And at IBM, we say design is about intent. How can I still be a designer who designs the teams that I build with intent, the interactions that I have cross functionally with intent, so that my teams succeed, but also so the design continues to flourish within IBM. So super excited to share just my experience with you and some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way that have proved pretty successful for me. So let me go ahead with that and share my presentation. All right. So again, this talk is about just transitioning from that individual contributor role into design management, which is quite like this illustration is a line, right? A line of demarcation. I feel like that a lot of designers come to, and hopefully at the end of this talk, I can maybe convince some. But if not, I can give others just a sense that as they continue to grow in their design career, that becoming a design manager is something that they maybe want to consider. Just to give a brief overview of what I'm going to walk through, I'm going to ask the $1 million question off the top, right? Do I want to be a design manager? Is that a job that will interest me? Is that a job that will be a role that will be a good fit for me? What do design managers do besides, handle interpersonal conflict or HR activities? I'm also going to talk about managing yourself and the importance of even as you manage others, making sure that you're still growing as a designer and as a manager. Managing others, which is about managing your team and trying to work with other stakeholders to create better environments within your organizations. Managing a business, which is about how do you be an advocate for design as a manager outside of the teams that you directly impact. And then I'm going to conclude by just sharing a brief overview of what my journey's been like so far, some successes and some battles I'm still fighting. And then at the end, I've got some helpful resources that I think everyone should check out because they've been extremely helpful for me. So starting off with the question, right? To be or not to be? That is the question. Especially, I think, when you're considering making a change from being a designer that is not responsible for managing others and their performance to becoming a design manager, right? Where you do have to focus more on coaching others. You're focusing more on how do I grow this person? How do I get this person really to be the next generation version of them, right? And sometimes you have to do that in a short time span. Um, and, you know, it's probably the case for some of you that as you think about the prospect of management, it seems maybe unfun, right? It seems like you're giving up all the expertise and the craft and the skill and the experience that you've had, and you're kind of hanging it up. And I want to illustrate today with this talk that that's definitely not the case. The world is full of problems, and every problem needs a designer to think intentionally about solutions that can create a better future, right? And the organizations that we find ourselves in are no different. The products that we're asked to build are more and more complex every day, and the market is, saturated with competitors in the same space. So when you think about that as an individual contributor, yes, the work is kind of like very straightforward. I need to design this. I need to, we need to do user research. We have to do A/B testing. We have to be iterative, right? Are we following Agile? Are we aligned with PM? All of those aspects come into play. When you're a design manager, your focus, right, and also your attention at times needs to be applied to some of those areas, but you also need to think more cross-functionally about how can you begin to set up your team for success, your organization for success, when folks aren't used to following design's lead. So do you want to be a design manager, right? It's not easy sometimes to convince folks that you have a process that you can implement that can improve things, or that you know the customer better than they do, right? It's tough as an individual contributor. When you become a manager, right, things get easier and they get harder. The easier part is that you have an opportunity to kind of work with some of the folks that influence those people, and to get them to kind of see opportunities that they don't, see when you present it to them, or when your teams present it to them. But at the same time, you're not responsible for the execution, right? So you're kind of trying to orchestrate a lot of things and influence them indirectly, which is very complicated. An analogy that I like to use to think about the difference in between being a designer and becoming a design manager is the role of actors and directors, right? So actors, we all may have our favorite movie, our favorite actor that we love to go to the theaters anytime they have a new movie out. And some people maybe even have their favorite directors, Scorsese, Clint Eastwood, Spike Lee, you name it, right? Each of these roles are very important, but they're also very different. And so when you think about your career, I think it's important, as you come closer to that line of trying to decide, is management right for me? I think it's important to start thinking about, the actors, the actor persona, which would be more of the designer, and the director persona, which would be more managers, right? So the actors, the IC designers, they're focused on execution, right? They want to understand user needs and goals. They want to become an expert in their craft so they can kind of understand the trends and the clues of human behavior, and bring together those things to create intuitive solutions, right? They also want to create connections with their customers that are delightful, that create empathy and value. And at the end of the day, much like actors, right? They want to be recognized, right? They want that Golden Globe, or that Oscar for best designer, on a team, right? And I think, like, not to move too quickly back to the management part, but I think IC designers are super critical, right? They do the work on the ground. They're responsible for execution. They understand our customers. They're in the meetings and able to push back when a team is kind of, being pulled off track by maybe some competing priorities within the organization that don't speak to the needs of the customer, right? But as a person responsible for execution, it's hard at times for you to really manage and understand, how can I influence the outcomes, right? How can I make sure that we're building the right thing, and make sure that we don't get taken over by over engineered experience, or a PM that maybe wants to build everything without a sense of the why behind it, right? Managers are great in those situations, right? Because managers are really about, how do I create and own outcomes? Outcomes for my team, outcomes for the design org, and ultimately outcomes for the business that you're in. Again, what design managers have to do is they have to understand relational dynamics, right? Within their teams. How do I set up a team to be successful? How do I set up a team where I don't have 3 or 4 stars and other folks, feel like they're not seen at all? At the same time, how do I create an environment where it's healthy, but everyone is still striving. They're still not settling for good enough when they know better is out there. Um, that's what managers called on to do, right? Managers are called on to coach and influence others to perform at the top of their game. And this is exciting because it's not always just your team. Sometimes it's a PM, right, who wants to kind of convey a vision that they don't quite know how to put words to, or how to put, a plan together or a strategy together to get it implemented within the team. That's an opportunity for you as a design manager to use those skills that you've honed as a designer to solve a problem in a different way that's ultimately going to create a better outcome for the designers that are responsible to create and deliver that experience. A huge part of this too is the importance of providing a vision that inspires others, right? We often, as individual contributing designers, you find yourself in a place where you're not motivated, right? You're working super hard every day. It seems like new things are being added to your plate, and it kind of can just seem like you're kind of stuck in the mud, right? Um, a good design manager in that situation is able to help you get traction, right? So you get unstuck. They help you find ways to work smarter, find ways to be more proactive, so that that meeting that was a drain on your energy, right, becomes a playground where you can create impact and you can kind of galvanize others to take more ownership of building a world-class experience, right, which is what most designers want to do. Um, and again, at the end of the day, design managers, they want the team to win, right? We definitely want to be rewarded and celebrated too, but nothing makes a design manager feel better, in my experience, from speaking for myself, than to see my team win, right? And my team is the design team, right? But my team is also them and their cross-functional partners. It's also the design org, right? It's also the business, right? And so every day there are new opportunities and new challenges that design managers can begin to tackle to ensure that the team wins and that design really gets more of a seat, and not just at the table, but at times in the driver's seat, really helping the organization propel itself forward. So with that, right, I'm selling, I'm selling my wares. I'm a design manager. I made the switch and I love it, right? But one thing I definitely want to say is that this journey is your journey, right? I know within organizations, maybe there's a need for a design manager, and so they promote someone up into that role. Or maybe you've, been eyeing it for a while, and there's a position out there that you're interested in, but you don't know much about that team, or you don't know much about the person that you'd work with, right? I think it's very important to make sure that you're very intentional about taking the steps to become a design manager. Not like you can't go back if you don't feel like it's the right fit, but I say this because I believe that the most important career that you will ever impact is your own, right? So the degree to which you manage successfully your career as a designer, right, speaks to the ways in which you're going to help create a vision and an implementation of that vision for the folks that report to you, right? Those all-star designers who right now maybe are 6 months out of graduate school or out of a boot camp, and the designer of their dreams is in them, but they don't quite know what to work on now to begin to move in that direction, right? Um, it's important to like be mindful of how am I creating that for myself, right? How am I being intentional about my own career and prioritizing what's important to me, right? So the first part of managing yourself, I would definitely say, is know what's important to you and where you want your career to go. The last thing you want to do, right, is end up in a role where you feel like you're far away from what matters, and you don't know if you can go back, right? You don't know if you've, still have opportunities, or you don't know if that same level of influence or impact, is available, in by going back. So I would say first, just make sure that you focus on what's important to you. Um, and also, I would say becoming a design manager again, you don't have to stop being a designer. Like I hear a lot of folks say, "Oh, you have to step away from it. It's totally different." I think it is totally different, but I think it's solving problems at scale, right? Now you're not just solving problems of a UI or problems of a service experience. You're solving problems of teams, right? How do you make and help humans work together better? That's a meaningful problem, right? That needs a designer, that needs someone who's building with intention, a vision and a plan for how to create that reality. And so I often kind of say to myself, hey, it's the same game. It's just a new board that I have to apply new strategies to, right? So I'm often like thinking about how do I bring user research into this? Like what's the user research task that I need to do today? I need to meet with, 5 cross-functional partners, and I need to kind of like make sure I understand what's important to them. I need to understand their POV on some things that the design team is really trying to implement so that I can help that team create a vision that's inclusive of that other stakeholder so they can get the buy-in that they need, right? So definitely just important to be mindful that you can still be that savant, right? You can still be that forward-thinking person, that creative person, even in this role. And I would lastly say it's super important to build a community of support. And I have here, kind of my 3 Ps: people, publications, and podcasts. You have to have people that you can talk to, that you can bounce ideas off of. It's great if it can be your manager, but if not, your old manager is a great person for you to reach out to. Also, other folks in the organizations, publications. I have a few here at the end, but I think like reading books and articles is super important to give you a perspective on how to do things better and different, and how to really accelerate your own growth and your team's growth. And then lastly, podcasts, of course, are awesome. The next section is about effective managers don't manage, right? No one wants to be managed, right? I think, when I think of the word design manager, like my favorite word in it is design. And at times my least favorite word is manager part, right? Because it has connotations, right? It has connotations that this person's going to tell you what to do. They're going to kind of dictate to the team. They're going to overstep. They're going to, kind of create more hurdles that the team has to jump over as opposed to removing those, right? And I've kind of develop this rule, right? That you have to lead through influence, build trust, and listen. Like that's the role of the design manager, right? An effective manager is leading, and they're leading through influence, right? They're building trust with their team and with others, and they're listening, right? Just like a designer has to listen, right? Just like we have to build trust with our partners. It's the same way as a design manager. You have to do that because folks won't follow you if they don't know you, right? And if they don't know that you're leading them to a place that's ultimately going to be good for them. My first rule, of managing talent, I always say, is to inspire them, right? People don't need you to just, kind of clock in and clock out, make sure they're, staying up on task, delivering things on time. They need to be inspired, right? And I know from my experience as a designer, which is something I often kind of think back to, there was always a designer in me that was ready to come forward and wanted to come forward, but there was never really someone there giving me the green light. And one kind of rule that I've adopted is like, every great designer is waiting for someone to give them permission to ask for forgiveness, right? Not to ask if they can do this, but to do it, right? To test it, to be lean, to be quick, to try to, poke the bear and see what happens, when we start, this new activity or we try a new process, right? Giving them permission to go out there and explore and find out what's in them and find out what solutions are waiting outside the door. This is also something that I always say to a lot of folks is like a new manager can bring out something different in you, right? So in managing others, like that's a thing that I almost lead with whenever I have a new person joining my team is like, hey, whatever happened before. I believe that as we work together, I can bring out something different in you, right? And I think it's kind of a two-way street too. They can bring out something different in you, right? Help you grow as a manager in a new way, understanding kind of new nuances that you didn't recognize before, that are going to make you just that much better as your teams grow and as the problems that you face grow. And lastly, living your values. Right. This is huge. I think living your values I have here, makes your values more valuable to others. Right. If you often say, hey, this is the process that we have in place, but you're always undermining and doing a different route, right? You're very quickly going to find yourself a person that's a talking head, right? Which is like for a manager, that's like that's like the kryptonite for a manager is to be a talking head, right? We want to make sure that we are living our values, and being intentional, right? Being intentional in our interactions with our team, being intentional with the way in which we use our authority in our leadership, so that we can build again, so that we can build with our designers and build with the other partners that we work with. The next part I have here is just every organization has a culture, right? This is super, super near and dear to my heart because I believe that one of the biggest challenges that design faces, right, is a lot of companies now think they understand design. They think they have it figured out. They think they know how they can kind of like utilize it within their organizations and how they should partner with whom and all these things, right? But every organization has a different culture. And some of those cultures can be an antiseptic, right? They can actually create more difficulties for the design team that they're trying to build than the design team actually helping them build the future that they think they're going to build with them. And so I often say, and this is a quote, I know a lot of you may have heard of it: culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Anytime that you're trying to put a strategy or some kind of new process in place, think outside of the box, kind of change the way things are happening, right? A culture that isn't prepared for that is going to reject it, right? Just like when you have surgery and you get a surgery, maybe you get like a liver replaced or some other organ replaced, right? Your body might try it initially to reject it, right? And I think that it's the same way when design becomes a part of a culture, is that if the folks that are within that design organization don't begin to influence that culture, the culture is slowly going to kind of push them out and relegate them to what their view is of design instead of the capabilities of the folks that they have on their team. So this next slide, I love this, right? Whenever you're coming into a new organization, you're starting a new job, right? Maybe some of us have an experience like this, maybe we don't, but you join the organization or the team and it's great. Hey, welcome to the team. We're so super excited to have you here, right? And then you start maybe raising ideas or raising questions that are contrary to the way things are done now, right? The state of things, right? And that's when Dr. Hyde comes out, right? And thinking about this again, it's about understanding the culture that you're in, right? Someone said to me when I first became a manager, you need to build your CYA network. And I was like, that's so interesting, right? And I think in about 3 weeks, I begin to realize, man, it's really important for me to have stakeholders that are within our design org, but also across our organization who can, lend their name, lend their presence in a meeting, right? Give me cover, right? As I go in to maybe try to change something or implement something different, because as a designer, as a creative, I'm always looking for problems to solve, right? I'm always looking to collaborate with someone to make something better. But again, like if you're in a culture that doesn't really make space for that, it's just really important to be prepared on how to navigate that, right? So, in managing a business, right, design managers are super critical to the success of design within the organization, right? It's not just the VP, right, or the director of design, right? And it's also not just the designers that are on the ground, right, in the trenches building the products. Design managers have a strategic opportunity, right, to help influence the culture in both of those realms, right? They can influence the way the design is perceived within the organization, but they can also help direct and influence the way that the designs that are coming out of the team are creating value for customers, right? And so I would just say, like, that's one, in my opinion, a big misconception is that design managers are, can almost be filled by anyone, right? That's one reason why I became a design manager, was because I'm like, hey, as a designer, there are some things that you will face that you really need someone who's either been there or someone that can be a strategist with you to help you get past hurdles, to help you get changes implemented that you feel like are going to be exponentially better than the processes and the practices that are currently in place. Next up, building networks of trust and advocacy cross-functionally. I think this is very important. Again, kind of going back to the earlier point about managers wanting the team to win, right? With across the organization, whether you're a designer, your PM, your dev, your test, wherever you sit, right? We all want to do one thing, right? We all sign up for these jobs, right? Because we want to build something great that someone, can find use out of, right? It's going to make their lives easier, whether you're on the business to consumer side or you're on the B2B side, right? You want to make something that's going to make someone's life better, right? And our partners want to do the same thing cross-functionally, like PM and development, they want to do the same thing. But our ways of going about it, right? Our mindsets are at times kind of opposed. So as a manager, like building networks, both at your team level, but also at their management, up their management chain, working with program directors, working with PMs, VPs of product management, and other stakeholders like that, you can really begin to influence and change the culture so that the design team isn't bottlenecked to whatever the organization kind of has done before, which is kind of my next point again, is just avoid settling for the status quo. When you come into an organization like I did, like I came and joined a team, there were already managers who had been here, 5, 10, 20 years, right? And I knew nothing besides being a designer on the ground, right? One thing that I had to realize is my value add to this group is to do things differently, right? It's to think about things in a different way. It's, I have this expression I say, if it ain't broke, break it. Like, how can I break this and make something new, make something more resilient out of it, right? Being a design manager, within an organization is super important to just avoid becoming a fixture on the wall, right? You want to stay attached to what made you a great designer, right? That curiosity, that unwillingness to settle, that striving to always find the ideal or the best version of whatever that can exist, right? And if you're a manager, maybe that's a team that's robust and ready for anything, but also knows how to speak to, the newest engineer all the way up to the highest executive about design in a way that gets your team opportunities to build products that folks are going to love, that are going to be profitable for your business, which is ultimately going to help design be better positioned within your organization. So if you take nothing else away and you become a design manager tomorrow, please remember, avoid settling for the status quo. The last note I have here, right? Schedule time to reflect on what's now, what's new, and what's next, right? Our teams, and even as a manager, right? You have things that you're working on right now, but you also have new things that you knew were coming, right? But you just didn't, you knew maybe there was a timetable that you could wait a little while. And then you also have those longer term strategic pieces, right? That vision that you had, that you galvanized the team with, right? Being mindful to spend time and reflecting on all these things and thinking about how am I making progress? What new do I know that's changed some of this value or some of the vision that we were pursuing? Or how does it rearrange some of the or 6 months or in the next year? Um, there we go. My story. So I wanted to make sure I saved a little time for this. I know we have a Q&A right after, but again, for me as an individual contributor, I had my first manager as a full-time designer was amazing, right? He wasn't a designer, but he didn't bottleneck us. He empowered us to solve problems within our team. He empowered us to kind of lead and set priorities and set agendas and kind of set a vision for the development teams that we were working with. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to be a manager was because of my experience with him, because it just kind of changed the way I thought about, the way I thought about value, right? I thought the value that I saw as a designer was in making the thing. But then what I realized is, man, like if you can build a team, you know, I'm watching the playoffs right now, and maybe you're not a Golden State Warriors fan. I'm a huge Golden State Warriors fan, right? Building a dream team, right, where you have your Steph Currys, you have your Klay Thompsons, your Draymond Greens, right, your Jordan Pooles, you got everybody, right? How can I help build a team that's going to win championships, right? That's going to get design awards. That's going to really help an organization not be design led in name in the way we advertise the organization, but to truly let design lead. And not meaning designers, but the design mindset, right? That focus again on building with intention. How do we let that become the ethos for an organization, right? That happens when you build a team that wins championships. And so I was like, man, this is really exciting. Maybe in 5, 10 years, I'll consider that. Fast forward a year and a half or so, I was in another organization and opportunity came up to begin thinking about it. And I kind of looked around and I saw a lot of designers who I knew were rock stars who were just kind of twiddling their thumbs and like waiting for something more exciting to happen, or they were building their own apps, or they were building 3D models. They were doing all this super awesome creative stuff that they weren't contributing that creative energy when we were having collaborative sessions and we were building products. And I was like, man, they need someone that can come and sit with them and help inspire them to bring that same passion into this work, or to help them find opportunities to pursue their passion in another role, right? Because ultimately for me, it's like, how can I, build for someone either the perfect role here within our organization, or how can I be a champion and an advocate for them to use my network to get that great opportunity. So long story short, I saw a posting. I was very apprehensive about how it would go as a new manager, but I applied and I got through the interview process, got the opportunity to step into this role. And like immediately, right, I began to see more than anything that folks needed vision, right? They needed someone that was going to kind of be quiet, right? But be observant, right? Be listening, right? And so I kind of loved it because I became a user researcher again. I was just, my lab was working with my design teams. And really, I haven't really said this to many people, but becoming a design manager, right, and beginning to design organizationally and at scale with the teams that I have now, it really reinvigorated my passion for design, right? Because design can be attached and applied to anything with great outcome, right? But again, it's about what do you want to do, right? And what I found is this is kind of my niche. I want to build people so that they can build themselves to become the person that they want to be, right, for their career, right? That's my passion, right? Building designers in that way, working cross-functionally to help folks realize how do they grow their leadership, how do they grow their influence, right? And I think the more I think about my future, like I'm super excited that I'm on this path because I see very clearly how I can continue to grow and adjust my scope and focus to manage more teams, to help more people realize their potential, and ultimately help organizations begin to realize a future that they didn't know was possible. So, in closing, right? Do you want to be a design manager? Right? I know how I would answer that question for myself, right? But how would you answer it, right? Maybe you've been on this line and you've not been, sure which direction you want to go. Do I want to manage people? Do I want to stay on the IC side and just build and craft great experiences? If that's the path, building and creating those great experiences, that's awesome. Like I would say 100% answer this question with no, right? But if anything that I said, either in my story or in going through the other parts of this presentation, have kind of caused you to think again, right? I would encourage you to continue to explore, right? And see if your answer to this question is really yes, right? I think it should be. I drank the Kool-Aid and I'm loving it. So, lastly, I just wanted to share some resources. These are resources that have been super helpful for me. Making of a Manager by Julie Zhao. She used to be, I think, the VP of Design at Facebook. This book is super. It was like the Bible when I first joined. I could literally like open it up and find a chapter that would give me an answer or an approach or a perspective to think about the problems I was facing. And it still does the same thing today. It's an amazing book. It's definitely a must read, even if you're not going to manage a team. I think managing yourself and thinking about what's important for your career, this is also just a great book for that. What You Do Is Who You Are by Ben Horowitz, amazing book about culture, about how the culture we espouse, when it's not the culture that we embody, we can't succeed, right? He gives great illustrations historically about, different folks who have tried to, create a culture that was different than the culture they really lived and the end that came of them. And so this is just a super great book about that. Radical Candor, Kim Scott, amazing book that's helped me navigate tough conversations with designers and also helped me navigate, having tough conversations with my own directors and my own manager. And the Crazy Ones podcast, I had to put that on here. Stephen Gates, he has a podcast. It's not always like super regularly scheduled, but I've learned so much going through there. It's helped me think about myself as a designer and now as a design leader in a different way. That's really kind of helped me both, again, be re-inspired that design is not only what I love to do, but it's really what I was created to do. Design experiences, but also build people, right, into their full, fully, what's the word I'm looking for? Into their full self, right, into their true self. So definitely check that out. And with that, I think, thank you, and we can move to some Q&A. Oh, I can't hear you, Maria.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Our first question is from Mandy. She asks, in your first manager role, what were some things that were surprisingly easy as you transitioned from independent contributor to manager? And what were some of the more difficult things?
Yeah. Wow, that's a good question. Um, some things that were surprisingly easy. Um, I would say like really helping the team find success in trying to create change within their cross-functional teams. Um, was really easy because I had been a designer for so long and I'd worked in different business units within IBM, which is where I work. I knew that there were kind of similar problems that different stakeholders that we work with, kind of struggle with. And so I was very quickly able to help them, like, huge sigh of relief, right? I think the harder part has been, you know, taking taking into account that I have this experience of all these different BUs, like how do I create more design cross pollination, right? Not just like sharing our kind of experiences, but how do we kind of come together and form a group that can build solutions together and kind of be one design org. Like that's kind of a, a, an unspoken goal of mine is for wherever you are. IBM is a huge organization. So wherever you are in IBM, I want someone's success who's leading a team in Shanghai to also have aftershocks here in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I live. And that's been really hard.
Great. Our next question is from Sarah, who asks, what advice do you give to someone who is a design lead slash manager and also an independent contributor?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. When I first joined, I came from being a content lead, right? Because I have a degree in English. I write fiction and nonfiction, so like words are kind of they scream at me. And so when looking at different designs of teams that I was working with, were showing me, I was just like, oh man, this content, my eyes were almost hurting a little bit sometimes just because I was like, man, this could have so much more personality and be so much more actionable and impactful. And so I decided, oh, I have some time, right? I can do this. And I tried and people were excited and they loved it. And developers are sending me stuff but I very quickly realized that I'm creating both a bottleneck, but also it's going to become, expectations that I can't actually deliver on. So I think just, making sure that you wean yourself off of some of that work. And what I did was I grabbed a few peers that I knew who were in content design, and I said, "Hey, send us a bunch of resources. Give us a 2-hour workshop, and show us how you do what you do." So that we can kind of ingest that and become, you know, um, not content designers, but content conscious designers, so that we can build something that's better than where we are currently, while we try to onboard content designers to the team.
Awesome. I'm not seeing any other, oh, just kidding. Let's see here. Polly, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, asks, well, she says, really incredible presentation. You seem like a wonderful manager. And she also asks, how long did it take you to feel comfortable and confident in a manager role coming from an independent contractor role? Weeks, months, years?
Yeah. Honestly, I think probably every day I feel a little unsure still, just because it's not even been a year. Um, but I think each time I get a win, I try to reflect on it and I try to just say, oh, this is a totally new challenge that I've never faced before, but I've done all these other things and like I'm seeing successful, outcomes for my team and for my organization. I can do this. And then I just try to get sleep the night before and go to work the next day and remind myself that I don't know what I'm doing, but I can do this. And I think, little by little, that's helping me. And I think the biggest part for me is like the folks who've been here 20 years, or, folks that are very senior, like really viewing my voice on equal footing with theirs and contributing as such. I think it's something that I talked to my manager about. I said, hey, I have these ideas, but I kind of tend to sit back in these conversations. And so he's helped me really overcome that. And he's also said, hey, Sean has something to say, I'm sure. And it helps me kind of step forward and say something. But thank you for that question. Thank you all for this question. It's great.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice too, that really applies in a lot of different ways, just counting those wins just as much as challenges. If there are any other questions, feel free to drop them below. We have about 3 more minutes, and we can go over if we have additional questions coming in. And it looks like we have one more here from Laura. She asks, what advice do you give to someone who was a design manager and now an independent contributor reporting into someone who has zero experience in management? How can one learn from this newbie?
Yeah, right. That's a tough situation. I think, being patient is probably the first thing I would say. It's just being patient and trying to find ways to give feedback. Like, I think that feedback is so important, right? But it's often really hard to be candid with people. But like that Radical Candor book by Kim Scott, like it helped me navigate a really tough conversation that I'd never had before, right? But I think you show empathy and care when you go there, right? When you say that thing that will make them better in the long run, that in the short term might not feel great to hear. And I think I respect that, right? I respect people saying, the tough thing because it means you care about me, right? You don't want me to go about thinking I'm doing a great job and really I'm I'm bringing everyone down. So I would say try to do that. See if you can find some peers that that you trust. And we do this thing. We just started doing it last fall. 360-degree feedback, right? You gather anonymous feedback and it all goes up to your manager. And then at the end of the year, your manager reviews with you that anonymous feedback, right? And so it's coming from your manager. It's not coming from a person directly. And so, like for me, I actually gave my feedback to my manager's manager and all the other managers that are my peers, they gave it to that person so that we can give our manager feedback. So I think if there's an opportunity for you to do some sort of skip level feedback um, avenue, that would be good because then you also feel safe giving that feedback.
Well, thank you so much, Sean. We're just about at time. You can do one final call for questions if anyone has a burning question that they waited till the last minute to drop in the chat. But thank you. This was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Not seeing anything else. So yeah, we can call it. Thank you again,
Yeah.
Sean.
Thank you. And feel free, anyone, reach out to me on LinkedIn, questions, or just to connect. I'd be more than happy to keep talking.